Welcome to What is Tabletop? I am Charles. I am new to the tabletop gaming world, and this is...
Frank, who has been doing this for far too long that he knows when Charles is off script and forgot what to say. So, hi.
Hi, hello.
Hello.
Good day.
How are you, sir?
I'm good.
Thanks, I'm fine. How are you?
So that's enough of the pleasantries.
Yeah, we're here to talk about all things tabletop RPGs. Things to
Yeah.
help you regardless of the system, because it's a fun fact, there's more systems out there than just 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. So, we're going to talk about all those things. Right, Charles?
That's right. We're going to talk about stuff today.
Indeed. What kind of stuff are we talking about, Charles?
Today we are focusing on character backstory.
Ooh, the thing I'm really good at writing and the thing that never gets to be implemented because those campaigns never last that long.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's how that works. I'm just cursed forever to be a DM. It's never going to not be a DM. I'm never not.
So,
that's just how it is.
I mean, I tried.
You tried?
I tried.
And?
I tried. I don't know what to say failed, but discontinued is probably a better term.
Yeah, and I think it's because I was one of your players. So it was never going to work out.
Well, it was scheduling, so...
Yes, because I was there. Even though I'm like...
He was there when he wasn't there.
Yeah, even though I'm like one of the more consistent people, it's everyone else. But like,
it really is.
then I can get that same group of people and there's consistent. And I genuinely don't get it sometimes.
Well, I think a lot of it had to do with we were playing 2 games kind of simultaneously at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't doing it every week, and you were doing it every week. And so Tuesday
Yeah.
was the day we were looking at.
Yeah, it's also called amateur numbers if you're only doing 2 games a week. All right, so let's go ahead. But you weren't there in the college years, my guy. You could do so many games. All right, but anyway, what are we talking about? What specifically in regards to character backstories?
So I guess the first question would be obviously, how important is it to have a backstory for your character?
Not at all. And also, I would say very important. Yeah, much like most things we're going to say, it depends on your group. Because you might, like, if you're playing a dungeon crawl game, like where you're just going through dungeons, kicking down doors,
Yeah.
your personalities don't matter that much. Like, the role-playing aspect is not there.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not going to need a backstory. Like, all you need to know is that you decided, I want to go kill monsters. And that's really all you need. That being said, if you are doing, let's say, a multi-year long epic fantasy where the bad guy is going to be an integral part to every person's character in some way, shape, or form,
Yeah.
you should probably have a backstory in that regard. So ultimately, it's going to come down to the kind of game you're playing. So we are going to be focusing more on the role players today than on the non-role players today. So that's what we're here to help you out with. Yeah.
So how do I make a backstory? Like, what are the things I need for my backstory?
So depending on your system, it's going to change your things, right? So some systems will have like backgrounds or like, origins, stuff like that. Things that happened to your character before they started adventuring. So knowing like why you have that stuff is a good thing to put in your backstory. So for example, in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, if you have a background, if you're an acolyte, you should probably understand, okay, my character was in some sort of monastery, some sort of religious thing for a certain amount of time. Yeah. What did he do there? How long was he there? What made him leave? Stuff like that.
Yeah.
That is when it's important to know what's in your backstory. Of course, you could just decide, I only did that for the stat stuff, for the things that put on my character sheet. You don't need it as much. But ultimately, if you can have at least some sort of idea of where was my character before the story started and how did my character get to where the story started, I think those are usually a good place to start when it comes to backstory.
Be something I enjoy doing because I enjoy creating backstories. I love creating characters. It's one of my favorite things to do. So creating a backstory is usually not a problem for me. So I like how you mentioned that you should have what you were doing before and how you before you met up with the party and then how you got there. Mm-hmm. Is there anything else that would be relevant or that would maybe make your experience more unique to the story? So
yeah, I would say one thing you can definitely do is have some NPCs in your backstory.
Okay.
They don't necessarily have to be like family members. They can be friends. They can be villains. Just some sort of, this is a character that exists in the world that my character is emotionally attached to, whether that's positive or negative. That's going to do wonders, because then you suddenly have a person that the DM can use, and They can have them pop up in the story whenever they feel like it and cause a lot of drama, cause a lot of other things here and there. And so ultimately, I think that's what you're going to want to go with. You're going to want to go with some players. You can have some locations that, depending on the kind of GM you have. If you have a collaborative GM who's like, yeah, you can make up a part of the world here. Or if you have the kind of GM who's like, no, everything's set in stone. Pick a city and I will tell you what's in that city. It's going to be a little harder to come up with your own, collaborative place. Yeah. But characters, more than likely, unless you decide to make yourself like a king that doesn't exist in that part of the world, characters are going to be easier to place in. So characters are definitely a huge thing. Obviously, we talked about like events that lead up to your character leaving. It could be as simple as I saw like an adventurer help me when I was little and I want to go help other people. It could be my whole family was burned by a man wearing a hockey mask and long claws and is definitely not both Freddy and Jason. And he murdered them all and looked at me and said, "You're next." And then I ran away and made some other horror movie reference. I don't know. Do you like horror movies, Charles?
I love horror movies, actually. It's one of my favorite things. So, but yeah.
And if you like horror movies, you should not be watching this video. I'm probably gonna cut this part out anyway. Before we continue, also the YouTube algorithm recommends us to tell you to like and subscribe. Now that we're at the beginning of the video, not at the end of the video.
Oh,
yeah, it's funny how that works.
We're learning so many new things about the YubTub.
But yeah, having characters is a huge thing.
All right.
Just having something. When I write my backstories, I tend to like bolden the characters that are important because, like, spoiler alert, sometimes the mom and the dad aren't that important to the story because it's like they're just over there. But maybe like the cousin is because he, stole the throne from me or something like that, and now I want revenge for it. Right? Having that kind of stuff very obviously laid out is a good thing too.
You know what? Something else I enjoy when creating a backstory is like having a McGuffin, almost like an item that's specific to my character that the DM can use or the GM can use for. Like it could be nothing. It could be just something like, oh, like I think it's really cool. My character wears this earring or this necklace or this pendant, and then maybe initially I have nothing planned for it, but my GM might have something he could use or they could use for that.
Right, bonus points if it ties into mechanics in the game. Right, like so if it's something like a brooch that gives you your magic powers.
Okay,
that's cool.
Like a focus,
okay. Or maybe it's a set of dog tags that actually relate to some past that you didn't know you had, a la Wolverine. Definitely feel free to steal things from other people, from other things that you like. If you like the Wolverine's backstory, you can steal that. Just know that the more of it you steal, the more obvious it is you stole it. Right? If you are a mutant who then got experimented on to get
adamantium.
Adamantium skeleton, and then has claws that pop out, and he doesn't remember his past, it's going to be very obvious that's Wolverine. But if you steal like only part of it, right, the amnesia bit, which I had a friend who did that, he gave me, this is the part of the backstory he gave me. He said, my character woke up on an experiment like testing bed, and they said it looks like the vitals are good, and then he escaped, murdered everybody, and left. And and then he's like, I don't know how I got there, and I'm like, oh yes, fool, you have given me plenty of interesting juicy bits. And I ruined that. He killed his family anyway. Yeah, that's also the bit you got to be careful about, is recognizing that the GM can if you're giving them a total amount of like, hey, my character has amnesia, do whatever you want, just know we will do whatever we want, and it will be very mean. Well,
I guess that brings us to our next point. So I created this really awesome backstory, at least I feel it is. How do I get my GM to use this backstory as part of the story?
Yeah,
for the greater story.
Well, number one, you should make sure that that's the kind of game you're playing.
Okay.
By talking to your GM. Number two, you should ask your GM, hey, I really want this to be a part of the campaign. And then number three, if like you feel like it's been a long enough time and your character backstory hasn't come up, and maybe like everyone else's has, again, ask like, hey, you have plans for my backstory, right? And maybe they'll say no. And if they say no, that's okay. Just have that conversation. Hopefully they can, fix it a little bit. If they say yes, then you got to trust, okay, it's going to come up at some later point. The first and only campaign I did from levels 1 to 20, had a bunch of new players. And so the first few arcs, like first few levels were basically just, the main story.
Yeah.
And then I got to a point where I'm like, okay, you guys have backstories. I am now going to explore each of your backstories. Like I specifically told them, I am going to explore your backstories. So if we're not doing yours right now, we will do yours in a few sessions.
Yeah.
And that got them to like be super interested and be like, oh, okay, cool. My character's backstory is going to pop up. But they didn't know like whose backstory. So that was also part of the fun is like you walk in a desert and you see a tree. It's like, who is that? Is it me? Is it you? Is it me? Is it me? Is it you? Is it me? Is it me? You, me? It's me. Oh. And so the fun that can come from that.
You're a tree?
Yeah. There was a tree. Yeah. No, not my tree. Not my tree. Also, speaking as a GM, the number one way to make me want to add someone's backstory into the game, because I'm
Tragedy.
already how much drama can I wring from this metaphorical sponge, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about Charles's character. He made his second character was named Ambrose
Fiddlesticks. Ambrose Fiddlesticks.
Yeah, and he was just this little gnome.
Bonus points. I'd say bonus points. You can tell me what the race was. But you just spoiled that.
He's this little gnome,
little gnomey,
who got kidnapped. And he was like, yeah, I have this creature named Madame Dollface. And I'm like, yes, 100%. We will have her show up again. You can't give me something as amazing as Madame Dollface and not expect me to then immediately use it again.
Funny thing is, I was playing off my own insecurities with dolls.
Right.
I don't like dolls. Dolls creep me out. So.
Oh, so it made it so easy.
Yeah. Oh, it freaked me out.
So like I think session 2 or 3, since that character was introduced, I literally had a doll show up. And you were like, right?
I play that to a T, man.
And everyone's like, the heck is wrong with this guy? Did he just freak out from a doll? What's going on here?
Yeah, I don't like dolls.
Yeah. So in that moment, Charles, how did you feel? Like, because you made this backstory.
Yeah.
This is your second character.
Correct.
So like we talked about backstory stuff with your first one, but like with your second character, how did you feel in that moment when suddenly I was like out of nowhere using your backstory? So
I felt, again, I'm going to use this terminology. I felt seen. I felt heard. No, but genuinely, like, it's cool because if you spend, again, like, if you're a creative type person, like Frank and I, like Frank and me, and when you spend that kind of time on a character and their backstory, it feels really nice to have your GM recognize that and want to use that. And it's nice when your inspirations can inspire other people.
Right.
So,
yeah. And so that was really fun. And then, he also gave me siblings, so the threat of stealing his siblings at any moment was always there.
That was in-story stuff, too.
Right. Yeah.
In-game.
And so, like, that was the fun bit, is that at any point, I could just take his siblings. And I didn't do that till the epilogue.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
If you can, too, you can also ask the GM, like, hey, do you have, like, a bad guy already in mind for this campaign? Can my character be tied to it? Because then suddenly you have, like, a personal stake in it. So I had a campaign where I knew who the bad guy was, and one of the players was like, I want to be a half vampire. And I'm like, oh, how convenient. That's who the bad guy is. So you'll be his son. This is his name. And then slowly I realized each player had something in common that was like a tragedy in their life. And I'm like, oh, the bad guy is the reason that each of that tragedy happened. Like, and because he was a vampire, right? Mm-hmm. Because he was a vampire, he could live forever. So we had this like time traveler guy who was like frozen for some time. And I'm like, well, he's the guy who actually killed all of your family and like clan. And he's like, what? And so like that also made intrigue because it's like, wait, how long has this guy been around for? What's going on? And so that was a lot of fun to be able to just be like, yep, all of these things are tied together to this
one
thing.
Big bad, yeah.
Yeah. And so that's something that is always nice if you can have a little bit of wiggle room, right? I think it was best heard from me of when you're writing your character backstory, only write what your character would know. So if it's like they found a magic sword, don't be like, they found a magic sword and there's an evil spirit living in it. Be like, they found this magic sword and this guy is telling them everything they can do to defeat their cousin who took the throne from them. And it's like, great, awesome. And then your GM can determine, is it evil? Is it good? Is it neutral? Like what is its ultimate goals? Is it maybe like, it could be literally just like the sword of your ancestor.
Yeah. Or
it could be an evil sword. Because it's probably going to be, let's be honest, probably going to be an evil sword. Never trust the evil swords. Or any swords that talk, really.
Yeah, I learned that lesson.
Yeah. You had an evil sword?
Yeah, it was I can't remember who had it first, and then I got it from them.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And then I was like, it craved blood.
Yeah,
all the
that's
time.
what happens sometimes when you let Frank have to make up a magic item on the spot. It's an evil sword. Because it's a little easier to like give an example than it is to just explain it. Like, I think we can always explain it, but then, it's a little different. So,
Yes.
Charles, let's do it this way.
All right, sure.
We're going to collaboratively make a backstory.
Yes.
We're going to make this system agnostic. So let's say it's a sci-fi character, right?
Go ahead.
It's going to be a sci-fi character.
All right, cool. Sci-fi character.
Yeah,
Got it.
just generic sci-fi. Maybe you could plop into any sci-fi story you want. Star Trek, Star Wars, Star Blazer. I don't know.
Star Blazer.
Star Blazer. So, if you were to play a sci-fi character, what would you? What
How
would
about
be?
Star Search?
Sure, sure. They have
That
a
was
really massive talent.
Go on.
What's the kind of character you would want to play?
So again, I love characters with either like the underdog characters or a minimum a character that has something to lose too. That's always fun. A character's got something to lose.
Okay.
So let's say this character is maybe protecting a secret.
Okay.
Like the secret.
So this is right. Like, we already know the tropes, right?
Yep.
Knowing the tropes is always a good thing. So Charles wants to play an underdog. He has a secret of some kind. He's protecting the secret. Here's the question I'm going to ask, right? And this could like change it a little bit in an interesting way.
Absolutely.
Do they know that they're protecting the secret, or is this like or do they not know? And if so, like, right? So like they can know, and it's just the generic, I'm the protector of the secret, and maybe the secret gets out. Or is it it's a family lineage thing, and they don't realize that they're part of that family lineage because they're too young, like they haven't been told the story? Is it they protect the secret, but like it's a secret from them too, and they don't realize it, right? Kind of like Luke a little bit, where it's
that.
like
Okay,
he's a Jedi and he doesn't realize it,
Yeah.
and so in a sense he's protecting the secret of the
He
Force.
He doesn't realize he's in a cult. Yeah. All
Yeah,
right.
I mean, yeah. So like, what are you thinking in that regard?
I was thinking this character would know.
Okay,
So
we're gonna go the boring route. Got it.
sorry. I did like where you were going with it though. So we
Right.
go the other route.
No. What do you like? Yeah. So let's go. Fine. Let's go that route.
Let's go the route. Let's go with the more interesting.
So
route.
then, why don't they know it?
Uh,
Is it a family lineage thing?
Perhaps it's to protect that character as well. Maybe other people in the family are protecting this character as well.
Okay, so maybe that character is the secret, right?
Okay.
We are making Luke Skywalker unintentionally, but let's see. So, and this is the thing too, right? When you realize we're making Luke Skywalker, you can like change it a little bit, right, to make it more unique. So this is a character who is themselves a secret. They don't know necessarily what for. Do they find out about it because of a tragedy? Do their like parents sit them down and tell them? Like how do they find out? Because I think, right, finding out that they are a secret is going to be what sets them off on adventure, right? Like that's the inciting incident. That's going to be the thing that sets them off.
I think it's always fun to put them in the middle of action, like they're like being pursued and they don't know why they're being pursued.
Okay. So was it like in the middle of the night, their family's like, hey, you got to go.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
And it's like, why? We literally can't tell you. Yeah. Which is also great too, because then it's like, well, why didn't their family tell them the secret? It's like, well, the one moment they had to tell them about it,
it happened too quickly.
It happened too quickly, and they had to go. Okay, so that's interesting. And then in this situation, right? So we have an obvious secret. We have something that the GM can use. Mm-hmm. In this situation, we can either add more details to the secret or less. So it could be a family lineage thing, like it could be a prophecy thing, maybe in like Fallout.
Oh yeah.
You know how like there's a certain group where it's like because they were away from radiation for so long, they're like healthier, right? Like Sean in Fallout 4, right? The baby, where it's like because he was not exposed to radiation, they want him. And so maybe it is literally just like you were born in such a specific condition that it makes you valuable to other people, right? So obviously, now we have our like backstory, what made them go out. Are like what kind of a thing are they going to be in sci-fi? Are they going to be like a pilot? Are they going to be like gun for hire? What are we thinking they're going to do? Like, so now that they're on the rung, what naturally do they become?
Space accountant.
Space accountant.
That's my joke answer. My real answer would be. Sorry.
Honestly, there's probably some games out there that you could
accountant.
be a space accountant. So like, I wouldn't joke about that too much.
Space teacher. No, I would say this character again because of if we're gonna go with family stuff. I think like maybe a merchant of some sort, where some like a moving merchant type stuff. Like you're constantly moving around because again they're trying to keep this child safe, the secret safe. So the more they move, the less like they can be pinned down. So.
Yeah, and maybe while they're moving, they're also trying to look up what is the secret.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's a natural inquisitive curiosity, and they're like, well, if I look it up, though, maybe that creates a trail that leads it to me, right? Like they start Googling or internet searching whatever it is useful in the sci-fi world you're working in about it. And then, but like the people pursuing them are like...
Space Trek.
Yeah, the space trekkers are like, hey, they're searching, this guy is searching for this on Quadrant 4. We got to go to Septile 87. I don't know. What are planet names? I can't think of planet names off the top of my head.
Planet QXB12C.
Planet 419. All right. Yeah, so like that's an interesting thing right there for sure. All right, so now let's do one more example. Okay. I think because we definitely have the time.
No, we definitely have the time.
We're gonna do a fantasy-esque character. We're not gonna do like specifically to Dungeons and Dragons because spoiler alert, there's other fantasies out there besides Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, like Mariah Carey's fantasy. That's the song. I'm sorry.
Speaking of things I'm gonna cut out of that. So
it's humor. People love it.
Yeah, if it was funny.
If you think I'm funny,
but
let me know.
You do know I could just cut this part out, right?
He's gonna cut this out.
Maybe not this part because you're not being as funny.
Oh,
I'm sorry. Now I'll cut that part out.
Frank is evil.
So let's think of a fantasy trope.
Sure.
So we just made a method where we started from literally the beginning of the character until like the natural point, right? Which is one way to do it.
Yeah.
You can definitely say, okay, I want to do this. How did they get there? Great. I found, they're going to be a merchant. So now what like mechanics can I make to find this merchant, right? Let's do it from reverse, right? So let's start with like what we ultimately want the character to be and then kind of like backpedal and figure out from there.
Okay.
How did they become that thing? So what's like a fantasy like trope or idea that you want that we can then backpedal towards?
The lovable rogue.
Okay. So a Han Solo-esque.
Yeah.
Right. Perfect. All right.
I like how we keep going with the Star Wars references.
There
are other rogues that are lovable.
Name one.
Han Solo.
He's the only one. That's why he's named Han Solo.
It's true. I'm sure there are more. I just can't think of Robin Hood.
Robin Hood's not a bad idea, actually.
Let's go with that. Let's go with that.
Okay, so we're going to be an archer rogue, kind of, like someone who's like, I just said we're not going to do D&D and we're doing D&D. So we're making an archer rogue. Fine. Why not?
He's a fox, though.
Sure.
Disney.
Sure. I don't care at this point. Like I said, you can do whatever stupid thing you want to do. And
look how hurtful his words are, guys.
You're literally making... You can't tell me that that's not dumb.
I didn't say it wasn't dumb, but it's still hurtful to say it out loud.
Oh, goodness. All right. I'm sorry that I said it out loud what everyone was thinking.
All right, moving on.
So we want to make some sort of like swashbuckler guy.
Yeah, swashbuckler would be fine.
So, okay, how did we get to this point? So we've already made, let's say we've already rolled the stats. We have our swashbuckler in front of us. So how the heck did we get here?
This character grew up from a very, maybe even a well-to-do family.
Okay.
Like they come from money.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And they always knew the joys and the advantages of having wealth. And then one day, their world comes crashing down. Their family loses all their wealth.
Interesting.
But through maybe an unfair kind of like system in place. It's like, oh, you had all this money. So not only is their money taken away, maybe the titles are stripped away from like the parents. Like, maybe they were like... a
hostile takeover type
yeah, exactly.
As you can see in this example, right, we started with a trope of Robin Hood-esque character. And then we were knowing who Robin Hood is, right?
Correct.
We decided to make some changes. Instead of him being a poor guy who steals from the rich and gives to the poor, he was rich and became poor. Which is a little more interesting, right, in that way. You obviously develop some sort of, attachment to the parents who literally just lost everything, and now they have to live in like squalor. Maybe you make a rival house out of that, right? And that's who they assume is the ones who did it. Like, I think that's where like a lot of fun can come into it, is the assumption of it. Because it could be true, in which case, great. Or it could be like a red herring.
Well, like even starting like an underground kind of movement was kind of cool. Like, your character, we joke a lot about like how everyone apparently starts cults, but like we never talk about like maybe grassroots like movements that that could better the world that are not religious based.
Right, and then that makes sense why they're kind of like rogue-esque. They're like
absolutely.
being super shady. Like they literally lost everything. Maybe they didn't lose everything, and like maybe your character, like this character had a little bit savings left over, and they're using that savings to.
It's almost like combining a little bit of Zorro. Zoro's basically the Spanish version of
Batman,
Mexican version of. More specifically, I would say Robin Hood.
Right.
Almost.
Well, I mean. Not to get there, but in the Batman comics, the movie they go to see before his parents are killed is Zorro.
Yeah, correct. Yeah,
so,
that's right.
Yeah, so also Batman.
So everything comes back to Batman.
Everything comes back to Batman.
Martha.
Why'd you say that name? But yeah, so that's the thing too, right?
Yeah.
You can start with a trope and then figure out, okay, how can I make it to where it's not so obviously this character? One of my favorite stories is of our friend Zach Brooks. He is like, I wanted to make Legolas, so I made Legolas. Can I be a half elf? Archer, ranger. And I'm like, you can. We already kind of have a lot of elves in our party. I think it'd be cool if we didn't. And he's like, okay. And he thought about it. He's like, what if he's in half orc, but I keep literally everything else the same? He was raised by elves. he believes all these things. And I'm like, that's actually like 10 times more interesting. Because it's like, well, wow, these elves took in this orc. That's interesting.
Yeah.
What happened with his orc family? Why is he suddenly... And he gave me like the answers where it's like his mom had relations with a human, thus giving birth to him. They saw him as lesser, so they cast her out, killed the human dad. She gives him to the elves and runs away because it's better to give him to the elves than to die. And the elves are like, yeah, we'll adopt this guy. Sure. And then the story that came from that was fascinating because it was obviously like this found family who ironically he started to lose over the course of the campaign versus his actual family that he would have to find later on. Unfortunately, the character went evil, but you know, that's how campaigns work sometimes is that.
Did that happen a lot with his characters?
Not his characters.
Okay. Just curious.
Yeah. It happens a lot in my campaigns though, where like a player character just like
evil. Dark side.
Yeah, so like I joke, I have the person who has the second highest player character kill rate is my friend Brett. He has killed like 3 different characters too, which were Zach's. So I do think this does bring up a point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Recognize that you have a backstory for your character, and you might have an idea where your character's going, but much like anything in D&D, it can go in, or any RPG, it can go completely sideways without you realizing it, right? Even as a GM, where I'm like, I have this character, I know X down the line, we're going to have this big reveal, right? That was what happened with your first character in our campaign. And they died.
Kind of.
Yeah. Well, no, they kind of died, and then they actually died. Yeah. Recognizing that things are going to change. What you had as an idea for your character's backstory is going to be gone. It's going to change a little bit. Maybe it'll be exactly what you envision. More than likely not. And you got to be okay with that. You got to be fine with the GM taking some changes and liberties to your backstory.
Absolutely.
You got to be fine with the dice determining that, hey, it's actually going to go this way instead, and rolling along with it, I think is a huge important thing. Yeah. Advice to GMs. Yep. This is advice from a person who's done this. Don't make changes to their backstory unless they're okay with it. I did that once to one of Zach Brooks's characters. He wanted to play a halfling who was trying to create a band of halflings, and I basically completely retconned his entire backstory for the sake of a twist. I am very fortunate that he was not mad at me. Yeah. He did get his revenge on me later, where I had a character, and I was like, you know what, I feel bad about that. You can do that to me, and he's like, okay. And it was going to be terrible if that campaign lasted any longer. But like I said, cursed. Yeah. Any other questions you got about backstories?
Well, actually, it's really like it's more about the GMs. Is about how do GMs, how do you implement those backstories, which you kind of answered a little bit, but can we go into more detail about that?
Let's go with our sci-fi character, right, that we just made up.
We'll call him Jimothy.
Jimothy over here is running away. So naturally, you want to create this group that's chasing after Jimothy. Yeah. And so that's where the fun can come in as a GM. Maybe you've already created a faction that's like these bounty hunters, and you can just have them also be chasing after Jimothy. Maybe you want to make a completely different group where the sole purpose of this group is just to find Jimothy, and that's the idea. You could also make it to where it's like 2 or 3 people, and like they're like actually trying to help Jimothy, right? And that could be an interesting little thing, right? So there's a lot of different routes you can go with that. Here's the thing too, when it comes to group making, and we'll go into later discussion about this at some other video, you don't need to make like 15 people. You can have 15 people chasing after them, but make like 2 or 3 people that they'll actually interact with and have them be a little bit expendable if they're evil, right? So like have 3 captains, and the first captain shows up and he's like, finally, Jimothy, we found you. And now you're going to go back to us with the mines, right? Drop a little bit of like lore. And then
no, you can't take me.
Not to the mines.
Not to the mines.
Why am I going to the mines? And then you have them fight, and you can have him die. You can have this captain die.
Yeah.
But they have dropped a little bit of lore, and you still have 2 other captains who can come up and do some stuff. I didn't do that one time. I fleshed out an entire faction system, and they interacted with like 3 of them. So don't be me. But so yeah, creating the group that is chasing after Jimothy, that's a huge thing. Creating the why. What is the secret? What is it? I just literally right now just improv'd the mines, and maybe this character has some sort of connection. Maybe when he was a baby, or maybe his parents touched some sort of mineral that gave them like special powers, psychic powers. Why not? Psychics. Sure. It passed down genetically to him, and that's why they're like, oh, he can do these psychic things. We can't tell him about it, because the second he starts using it, like, we're done for, we're found out. And so maybe that's what the inciting incident was, is he used the psychic powers one day, and they're like, crap, we got to send this guy out. He has to go. He has to leave. We can't have him be here anymore, because they're going to be coming after us. We'll do our best to slow him down. And so when you say the mines, it's like, you have to go back to the mines, because that's where the power amplification mineral is. And so like, that's another thing. Right. Knowing when you read a character's backstory, what are the things you need to fill out? So naturally in Jimothy's backstory, it's who's chasing after him and why are they chasing after him? Outside of that, you can add in some more things, like I said, where like maybe the parents were evil the whole time. Maybe they weren't. Maybe they're not actually his parents, right? These are like the different routes you can go. But ultimately, and then if the parents are still alive or not, that's also something you can do. But you don't have to do all of that. You have to do like the people chasing after him and why. That's the big things for sure.
I think what you said there too was know what questions you want to ask. Mm-hmm. Like, what do you want to know about their characters? I think having that ready before like session 0, like for each of your characters, like knowing what you want to ask them, like it will help tie better into your story as well. It will make it more relevant and more important. And again, really give hopefully that, that buy-in to your story as well. What
I like to do personally is obviously have the session 0 where everyone's making their characters.
Yeah.
But you can have like mini one-offs session 0s.
Oh yeah.
Where, because like we have players who like to make secret backstories and stuff like that.
That's
and so I can't just be like, tell me your backstory in front of everybody, because they're like, I don't want to tell them. So if I then usually have like one-on-ones where it's like, okay, you made Jimothy. Well, let me ask you some questions on how it can fit into my world. Maybe I have a faction that's already working in here, and I'm like, are you cool with this? Yeah, cool, done. Or Charles might be like, actually, I was thinking more something like this, and having those conversations. It helps a lot in that regard, to be able to sit down and talk it through. Yeah. You might also have a kind of player like we do. His name's Evan. He doesn't necessarily come to the table with a backstory, and so I have to give some questions, and then a backstory comes out of that. So being able to also ask the right questions as a GM, not just as a player, is also really good too. Right, like, so if he comes to me and he's like, oh yeah, Jimothy is this merchant who's running away from this group. Why is he running away from this group? His parents told him to. Does he know why? Nope. Cool. Now I know I have to figure out the why.
And again, the more information you can provide, again, I think it's important not to be too specific, but don't be too vague either, because you don't want to put it all on the GM to make up your backstory. I mean,
right.
I know some GMs don't mind it as much, but could you imagine an entire party,
right.
Like, hey, Frank, make us characters.
All right.
Yeah, it's making a character is a task, but there's again, like I said, I love doing it. So right. if I had characters come in, I'm like, sure, I'll help you with it, but I want you to play. Whenever I'm GMing, I want you to play what you want to play.
Finally, as a GM, I would think it's also important to be fine with your characters changing a world a little bit.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you have like big restrictions, like race restrictions, species restrictions, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And they're like, I want to do this. I wouldn't say don't say no, but like both the player and the GM should be like in cohesion with each other.
Yes. Communication.
Right. Good communication. But like if they're like, hey, I found on your map this port planet, and I want to be from there. That's where he does his merchant stuff. And you're like, but that's not what I was going to do with that planet. Maybe that is what you're going to do, right? I purposely have a lot of places when I world build that I don't fully have a big idea about. I have like regional ideas, but like the city itself, I don't have an idea. And so then that way, if a player's like, I want to come from this kind of a place, I'm like, well, that's right here, right here, or right here. And then they can kind of choose and flesh it out a little bit more, which is nice. Especially if you're doing bottom up world building, like we talked about in our other video, it's even easier to do that, where it's like, oh, I come from this far off place. Oh, does that place exist? Yep. That's one less thing I got to make. Yep. 100%. And it makes the world look a lot bigger than it actually is. So definitely being okay with your players having a little bit of like influence on the world itself, I think is a huge boon.
Of course. Yeah, I think that's one of the most important things too. Is just, again, we stress this a lot in our videos, and we'll keep stressing it. Communicate, talk to your GM, talk to your players, because again, if you want to have a good time, have a good experience with your tabletop role playing games, you're gonna want to be able to talk to each other.
It is a collaborative experience,
100%.
very intentionally. So like you have to be able to collaborate if you're going to be telling a story that way. Yeah.
So, well, I think that brings us pretty much to the end of this video. Again, like we said earlier, like the video, subscribe to our channel, especially if you're really into the tabletop role-playing games. We have so much more content coming out. We are looking forward to sharing the vast world of tabletop gaming with you. That's not just Dungeons & Dragons. While we do love it, it is not our only source of enjoyment. Yeah, so
we're currently playing a Star Wars RPG. That's actually really fun.
We
had a fun moment this last session.
Yeah, we
right?
did. It's great, man. Again, there's just something, playing games with your friends is just, something. There's just something about that collaboration, that time spent together, the camaraderie. Again, we hope that you guys get the opportunity to do this as well. So again, we love doing these videos, and we're excited to show you more of the content that we have coming out.
Yeah, and my advice to you, if you're going to be driving a car off a cliff, make sure you have an exit strategy. Ain't that right, Charles?
Stay witty.
Stay witty. Why not? Sure. That's how we end it.